Hello everybody, welcome to the stream. I'm recording an episode of the Private Citizen now. I'm late as always, kind of. I'm sorry. I can't plan. That's why I'm a freelancer. I went out running today, and I'll just go for a quick run. I haven't been running for 2 weeks basically because it's been very cold and snowy and icy and shitty and. Yeah, so I went running and I completely destroyed myself, completely wiped myself out, so I nearly collapsed actually, and then I had to go. Now I had to recover before I started the show. I had to make myself something to eat and recover, and I made myself a whole pot of Earl Grey, which is rather uncharacteristically for me to make a whole pot, but I do need it, I think. And I can't. Fuck. I can't. Right, here we go. I'm going to need all of that to not fall asleep. Which is not because of you. You're not boring. Hello, Borglet. How are you doing? Nice to have you. It's not because of you. It's because of me. While we are in chat, this is new. I have ! podcast now. So I don't have to rattle off this disclaimer all the time. So if somebody new comes in and they're kind of wondering what's going on and why I'm not responding, please just anybody who's in chat, just do a ! podcast and it will do that. And yeah. Right. Shall we do this? I see where's this button? See, Captain Egghead is actually in the Matrix room. We have a Matrix room now, which you can join. There's a link in the show notes of this episode that I'm releasing. Anyway, I'll get it fired off. I'll start the show immediately. To get this going, just need some tea to wake myself up. It's good. That hits the spot. Right, let's do a little test recording here. Come on. Why are you all crooked? Let's do a little test recording here. Everything armed. Everything's armed. Hello. This is a test recording. Testing. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. What is that? What is this? Right. Test this. Looks good. Right. Looks good. Where is Fubar?
In AD 2101. War was beginning.
Right, that seems to work. Okay, so we have that. Let's listen back. Recording, testing. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. What is that? What is this? Looks good.
War was beginning.
Right. That works. Everything seems to be working. So, I think we can. Where's this marker there? How do I turn that off? Right, is that gone now? I don't know. It's just making me nervous. Random marker there. Okay, I'll get the show started. Let's see if I can do it in one go. Since I'm late, I wanna get this recorded now and get it out. So everybody, strap in. Let's record a podcast here. You're listening to the Private Citizen, defending your right to have something to hide This is episode 57 for Wednesday, the 17th of February, 2021. All your data are belong to us. Hello everybody, my name is Fab. I'm coming to you live from the not so cold anymore city of Düsseldorf in Germany on the Rhine. Where it's gotten warm today. It's now like we had minus, I don't know, -6 or something a few days ago. Now it's like +11. It's going back and forth. I'm sorry, I have no idea what that is in Fahrenheit. Let's stay with the metric system here. Anyway, how are you doing? Thanks for listening to the show. Hope you're doing well. Today we have two topics that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about at first something I wanted to cover for a little bit. I talked about in an early episode. I talked about this fintech startup called Plaid, and they were going to be bought by Visa, and that deal is off. So I want to talk about that. And then I want to talk a bit about medical data and who our medical data belongs to, because this is something that was a bit of a revelation to me, even though I have many friends who actually work with medical data. And even though I do write a lot about privacy, I hadn't thought about it I thought about it, but like I watched this. I was at, I wasn't at, but talked about last episode that I was covering FOSDEM, and I picked up something from a talk there, of Matrix, and talked about that last episode. And this episode is basically the same thing. There was a talk at FOSDEM where this guy was talking about, he designs healthcare systems, and he was talking about medical data and who it belongs to. So that's something that put a new light on this kind of area that I'm interested in anyway, and I wanted to share that. And he raised some interesting questions. I want to kind of open the debate here a little bit. People who have been listening to the show know that I value your feedback. So especially on this point, I would like you to come back to me if you feel so inclined, and talk to me about what you think, and if this was obvious to you, or maybe it was maybe I'd just been living under a rock or something. I don't know. I would like to solicit some feedback. If you want to give me feedback, I'll mention this later on in the show, but you can go to privatecitizen.press. That's the website. That's privatecitizen, one word, and then .press. And that has contact details on it. It also has the show notes, which are handy because I try to give you all the material I use to prepare the show to enable you to, think about it, look at it, think about it yourself, come out with your own conclusions, and then maybe give me feedback and become a producer and, give us all some content we can talk about. But before we get into the first topic, which is going to be Plaid, we're going to talk about the medical data a bit later. There's a little bit of housekeeping I have to talk about. And the housekeeping item is the fact that next week there might not be an episode. I am upgrading my PC. I've been thinking about this for a bit, and I've ordered a new CPU. And currently I have an Intel i5 in my machine. But I've ordered a Ryzen 5, Ryzen 5 5600X, actually. That 5600, probably Ryzen 5 5600X is probably how you say that. I have no idea. I'm not a hardware guy. Anyway, I ordered that, so obviously I need a new motherboard. So I got a new motherboard on order, I got that CPU on order, and I actually also need to upgrade my RAM because I'm currently using DDR3 RAM in this machine. And with that motherboard and that CPU, kind of DDR4. So I need to do that. So I have that on order. That'll arrive probably in a day or two. And then I need to obviously take my PC apart. I do have a laptop and I could record an episode, but it's kind of putting, I still have work to do that week, and it's kind of putting would put extra stress on me. So my idea was I'm just going to skip that episode. Usually, I'm committed to delivering you an episode a week, and if at all possible, on Wednesdays, barring special circumstances like holidays or this. And we're not going to skip that episode. I'm going to make that up to you, that the week after, in some week after, I'll just release 2 episodes. So that topic that I would have talked about next week, I'm just going to talk about a little bit later. I just wanted to let you know. I just need a few days. Obviously, I need to make sure I make lists of all my software and sort everything out and make sure my backups are all in order. And then I actually need to reinstall Windows as well because new motherboard, which is great because I need to reinstall Windows anyway because it's been doing weird things. I don't think the Linux partition is going to have any problem with the motherboard change. I think it'll just boot. But Windows obviously will have to be reinstalled. I have to reinstall the software. I mean, reinstalling Windows actually is quite quick these days, not like in the olden days. We had to plan like a day for that. But, it's going to take 1 day or 2. So I'm going to just take my time with that. Anyway, so just so you know, if there's no episode next week, don't panic. That's what's happening. And I'll give you the episode a little bit later. Now, let's get into the show and let's first talk about Plaid. And I'm going to play the breaking news thing because I don't get a chance to use this often and I like it. Although this is not breaking news. This is like a month old. And I wanted to talk about this for a while. Just had to push it off for other topics. And, anyway, I'm going to still play that sting now. So what are we talking about? Plaid is this company. I actually talked about them in episode 20. That episode was entitled... oh, God. No, it's not. Oh, of course it's not loading. Because... Oh, God. Little look behind the curtain here. My website runs on Hugo, and I have to obviously run the Hugo server locally. So actually that one website was still like the show notes I was working on was still cached in my browser, but obviously I can't click on any links. So I'll just need to waffle here a little bit. I mean, I do this live to tape, so I'm not cutting that out. Anyway, so that was episode 20, entitled "The Happy Plumbers Who Know Everything About You." It's actually it's one of the most listened to episodes. It's very popular. People seem to like that. Plaid is this, just to quickly sum it up, so it's like a little bit creepy company that is like an API that basically, because especially in the US, they don't have any like legislation for banks interoperating, they have found this niche where they basically, so if you want to use a fintech app that needs access to your bank accounts, right, to get on the data and do everything and get at all the stuff. But because there's really no API or anything like that, it does kind of they need a way to do that. So what Plaid does is basically, it's really creepy. You give them your login data, or you don't even know that. You might be using a fintech app, right? And you give the fintech app the login details for your bank account. And then they give that to Plaid, and Plaid has like this software, which in some cases is actually a screen grabber, where they like scrub the website and they pretend to be you and log into the banking website. It's like really hacky. It's really scary. We are a bit more lucky in the EU because they had, the same law that required two-factor authentication for like banking interactions, which pissed off a lot of people because now they have to authenticate all the time, like using their phone or something. It's kind of that same legislation put in like a legislation for like a standardized API that fintechs can use, which is a lot better. So you don't have to, like, Plaid has literally your credentials. Like, they could like transfer all your money from your bank account. I mean, it would probably, the bank, you would notice, and you could probably figure that out. But still. Like and they get all the information, right? It's the weird thing is, so that this little bit scary thing is that they sit in the middle and they collect all this information. So it's one thing if I want to use a fintech app, and the app is basically right. You give us your bank account, and we'll analyze it for you, and we'll optimize the way you're spending stuff and give you credit or whatever. And it's okay to decide. I personally wouldn't want that, but it's okay for you to, I think, to decide and give them that access if you thought about this, you think it's worth it. But but like you're not even knowing that there's like this layer in the middle is like really, really, it's not really nefarious because it's probably in the terms of it must be in the terms of service from whatever app you're using, but nobody reads that. So it is weird, and it's a weird company. Now the what I talked about in that episode, in episode 20, was especially that they had just announced the deal that Visa was going to buy them, and Visa, of course, I think the biggest payment processor these days. That's obviously a huge story. It's just that made the whole thing even worse, kinda. And it's anyway, the deal's off. So that's, I guess, good news. I mean, it's not really good news because Plaid is still around and they're still scary, I think. But at least the deal is off. Now I'm going to quote here from a story on TechCrunch, which is now pretty much a month old, that talks about this. So this is from the middle of January. I just didn't get around to talk about this earlier. The deal, valued at $5.3 billion at the time of its announcement, first broke cover on January the 13th, 2020, or nearly 1 year ago to the day. However, the Department of Justice filed suit to block the deal in November of 2020, arguing that the combination would, quote, eliminate nascent competitive threat that would likely result in substantial savings and more innovative online debit services for merchants and consumers. So basically, Visa owning this technology would make them the de facto payment processor that everybody uses. At the time, Visa argued that the government's point of view was, quote, flawed. However, today the two companies confirmed the deal is officially off. In a release, Visa wrote that it could have eventually executed the deal, but that, quote, protracted and complex litigation, end quote, would take lots of time to sort out. Plaid was a bit more upbeat in its own notes, writing that in the last year it had seen, quote, an unprecedented uptick in demand for the services powered by Plaid, end quote. Typical PR line. This was this again. TechCrunch they just print like company PR bullshit. Given the fintech boom that 2020 saw as consumers flocked to free stock trading apps, I mean, we talked about that recently, and neobanks, that Plaid saw growth last year is not surprising. After all, Plaid's product sits between consumers and fintech companies. So if those parties were executing more transactions, the API startup would likely saw more demand for its own offerings. And basically, they get paid, right? I don't know if they get paid on transaction, but they get paid by all these companies to provide this access to the banks. I don't know how the banks feel about this, because I'd be like, I don't know, I'd be pissed off if they just do use a screen grabber to access the interface. I'm not quite sure. I think they actually couldn't do that. I think in Germany that would be illegal. I'm not quite sure. I mean, I think technically that's hacking, and that would actually be a crime. Although there are, of course, exceptions to that. Famously, Heise, I think was it the editor-in-chief of EX at the time, I think, basically went to the police and said, with this new law, basically, I'm hacking during my job, and he basically filed for criminal charges against himself, and then the government had to clarify that, that in that case it wasn't hacking, but the law wasn't changed. So I don't know. I don't think they can do that in Europe. But the interesting thing here is basically that they probably could have executed the deal as they say, but that they just thought it was too much hassle. Like the government would have probably, I don't know. It's like they could have filed suit, of course, as they apparently as they did, and they could have won that, but they could also have changed the laws or something. I don't know. That's probably more I'm not completely up to antitrust law in the US. I think a lot has changed since I was actively interested in this, back in the Microsoft days. When Microsoft was doing all these dirty things to other companies. But I think a lot of things have changed. But basically, I mean, this is a $5.3 billion deal. So it's a huge deal. So if they're calling it off by themselves, they must have felt the pressure, right? I think that's pretty much the case. Sorry, I'm just juggling here a little bit. I need a little bit of tea. I was running before the show because I wasn't running for like 2 weeks because it was so cold, and not only cold but also like slippery outside, like icy. Oh. I just knocked something over. It's all good. Nothing broken. It's after the beer sock incident from last time, which we're going to talk about later in the feedback. Don't be worried. No spillage has occurred. Right. So I was running, and I'm completely destroyed myself, and I nearly fell asleep before doing the show. So I'm like doping myself up with a very strong Earl Grey to get myself through the show. Without falling asleep. Not that the topic is boring, I think, but anyway, that's basically that's it. That's all I want to talk about. Just a short thing. I just wanted to. I'd originally, I think, planned an episode on this, but then I thought, well, I covered all Plaid and all this. I'm gonna keep an eye on them. Definitely missed that thing in November, which is a little bit dumb from me, but I think this is very interesting. But with this deal being off, at least the threat of Visa taking everything over is minimized a little bit. Okay, so let's talk about our second topic, which is going to be a completely different topic. This is why this episode is called "All Your Data Are Belong to Us," which is of course a reference to a meme, to a geek meme. If you don't know that, it's from a video game. I think it's a Sega Mega Drive game. I think it's called Zero Wing, and it was like this intro cinematic, which was originally, I guess, in Japanese, and they just translated it really badly, and so the guy says, "All your base are belong to us." If you don't know it, I'm gonna intro this segment with it, so it's about 1.5 minutes long, so don't worry. What is this crazy shit that Fab's playing? This is the meme, in case you've never heard it before.
In AD 2101. War was beginning.
What happened?
Somebody set up us the bomb. We get signal.
What?
Main screen turn on.
It's... How are you, gentlemen? All your base are belong to us. You are on the way to destruction. What you say? You have no chance to survive at your time. Ha 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 ha.
Captain.
Take off that ring. You know what you're doing. Move to 4. Great. Justice.
This could have been the slogan of this podcast, "For great justice." I just love, yes, they put it like that in the video game. It is horrific. But of course that gave us the phrase all your base are belong to us, which which is great. And I called this "All Your Data Are Belong to Us" because what I want to talk about now is medical data. And it's obviously interesting, especially interesting these days. We're talking a lot about medical problems for the last year. And there's a lot of medical data that in connection to the pandemic is being accumulated, which this all applies to. So medical data is just getting more and more. So what are we going to talk about? So I was reporting on a talk a developer gave at FOSDEM, which is a big open source conference, which usually happens in Brussels every year, and this year obviously was online. And this guy's called Johan Sonnen, and he's from the US, and he works he designs software for healthcare systems. from the stuff he showed, it looked like a lot of it is, I think, cloud software, data collection software, something like that. And so he argued in his talk, the gist of his talk was, we should all own our own medical data. And so I see this, and like pretty much everybody else there was thinking, what do you mean? Don't we own it? And we don't. So it turns out that if you go to a hospital for treatment, or any other, you go to whatever medical system in your country, your healthcare system, and they will collect data from you. Let's say you have heart palpitations, right? You go in, you see a cardiologist. They will do an EKG, ECG, that's K in German, electrocardiogram, right? They look at your heart. Maybe you have some other problems. They'll do a CT or a PET scan or something like that. Or even like, what you tell the doctor the problem is and what he prescribes to you, that's all data. Turns out that doesn't belong to you. That belongs to the institution you're with, you went to, right? Let's say you go into a hospital and they make an X-ray. That X-ray belongs to them. Now, in Germany, of course, you have the right to get that X-ray, right? And in Europe, you have rights with respect to that data. We talked about the GDPR previously. I think I'll have to do an episode completely on the GDPR. People have been requesting this. I thought, it was good to just talk about aspects of that law when they come up. But I can do an episode on that maybe at some point. This is something you can chime in if you want that or don't want that. Privatecitizen.press. But you have rights, and they're governed by the GDPR. But what these rights are, they specify like controls you have, like leverage you have about data that belongs to other people. So that hospital has data from you under the GDPR. You have the right to know what data they hold, how they accumulated it, how they store it. You can ask them to delete it after a certain time, all this kind of stuff. But that doesn't change that the data actually does not belong to you. In fact, and he quoted in his talk, Sonnen quoted in his talk, he sounds like a villain from, he sounds like that guy from Star Trek Generations. He was a very nice guy though. Very, doesn't look like a villain at all. But anyway, so he what he was saying is that this data in fact does not belong to you. The GDPR, for example, explicitly states that this is not your data, right? That you have rights about this data that belongs to other people, that kind of describes you. And if you think about it, that is probably the case with lots of stuff where the GDPR applies, like personally identifiable data, right? So if you, in Germany, you need to be registered with the government office and they know where you live, that data, I would think, in this respect, belongs to them. I just have rights because that data identifies me. And what Sonnen was saying is, why don't we change this? Why don't we make it so that this data actually belongs to you, the patient? Which I think makes sense because it's intimate. Medical data is pretty much the most intimate data you can have. It's very intimate. Why should that belong to somebody else? And what he kind of, from his background as somebody who designs these systems, kind of proposed was like a system where basically if you go to a hospital and they want to, they scan you, whatever, that data, that scan, whatever, that belongs to you. And if somebody wants access to that data, including that hospital, they basically need to sign a contract with you. They need to license that data from you. Of course, in practice, that would be very... It wouldn't be trivial, right? You can't sign a contract every time. Like, especially there are problems with consent in hospitals, right? So my wife works with a lot of cardiologists, so I talk to them a lot. And they have this thing that obviously if you go to the hospital and you've had a heart attack and incapacitated, right? They need to, like a lot of times they just presume consent, right? They will have to do tests, sometimes even invasive tests. Sometimes they have to operate, and you might not even be conscious, and they can't reach like your next of kin, right? They will just assume that the unconscious guy who was just found by somebody on the sidewalk, transported with an ambulance into the hospital, is giving them the consent to save their lives, which I think is reasonable, right? You can't have people die because they can't give consent. So this is a complicated topic, and also with procedures, right? There are often people who might not, like, they have to give consent even if they're conscious and they're maybe even sane, right? They're completely legally they have all their faculties. They might still not be able to give consent sometimes to a procedure because they don't understand it, for example, right? Maybe they are just confused, they're old, with, it's kind of like, with the pandemic, with COVID, most of these people are old, and sometimes it's like really hard to get, like, are we going to resuscitate them? Are you going to put them on a ventilator? Sometimes even hard for people to understand what kind of procedures they're about to do with them. With cardiovascular patients, the same thing. You have somebody who's 85, you try to explain to them what a catheter ablation is. They will not understand what you're doing. And sometimes they don't have next of kin. So it's sometimes hard to get these consent things. And that's the same thing with data, right? Every time you're doing a study, obviously you know lots of people because of, people I know and people my wife knows. There are lots of people who do medical studies or, biologists and stuff like that. And they deal with patient data. And, when you make a study and you have patients and you I don't know, have ECGs taken, whatever, that's patient data. You need to get consent to put that in the study and publish that and stuff like that. So that's already really hard. And so he's proposing kind of like a next gen system. So he proposed like this thing, I think it's like a cloud service, something he called the patient data manager, which is kind of like a bot. So basically it's a system. It would be a central system. Let's say in Germany, we have a centralized healthcare system. There are already government organizations in place, and in the UK it would be the NHS. They would have a system where they keep that data, but under your control, right? You'd have a centralized system. Obviously, you'd have to take care that privacy is, especially with a cloud system, that would be non-trivial. That privacy is accounted for, that it is a secure system. But you'd have that system, and then you'd have people, you'd have patient data in there, and that the patient then could define directives, right? You could say, okay, I'm okay with my data going to the hospital if I'm being, if there's a procedure that they're doing, they need to get this data, or I'm okay with this data to be used for science, but I don't want this to be sold to companies for commercial things. That would be hard. That's also non-trivial, because I know, like, from, I have a penchant for software licenses, also content licenses. And I know that, for example, Creative Commons has had basically, they have non-commercial licenses, and they tell everybody don't use the non-commercial licenses, because it is, in some jurisdictions, and Germany is one of them, it is extremely hard to define a non-commercial, right? So does non-commercial mean, so if you're a commercial entity and you use something but you don't make any money from it, is that commercial, right? Is it automatically not commercial if I'm not a commercial entity, right? So if I'm, for example, I'm a freelance journalist, right? I don't have a company, right? I have like a brand, Fab.Industries, but it's not a company. It's just me. It's just a name for me working as a freelancer. So legally, I'm just a person, right? If I'd use something under the non-commercial, would that be commercial? Like, would I be commercial? Because I'm not a company. I'm just, yeah. Do I have to make money from it? What happens if I don't make money for a long time and then suddenly make money? So this is all not trivial. I understand that. But I think his idea was interesting. I'm not saying, putting this all in a cloud system is like the perfect idea either. The term blockchain was involved, which I'm not a fan of. In my mind, somebody who uses the term blockchain does not understand what a database is, because otherwise they would just say database. The blockchain is literally for this kind of application. I mean, yes, if in Bitcoin, for example, it does something very special, right? It does like a non-centralized currency, which was a genuine like innovation and invention. But like if companies talk about it, we'll put this data on a blockchain. It's like, why don't you just use a cryptographically authenticated database like Git, basically, right? So I don't know. I don't know about his technical conclusion, but I think that would be an interesting idea. And I think you could probably do it, that the default would be it can be used for everything, right? And then because like try to explain this to somebody who's 70, right? Like what medical data is used for, when it is used for. And in Germany, everybody just say, no, I don't want nobody to have any data. And then you're in a life-threatening situation and then can't get to your data and you die. That would not be good. But, somebody like me who is interested in this, who could get into this, could then specify certain things. I think that's a good idea. Now, why is he proposing that, right? He had a very good example of, like, I know why he's proposing. I know what happens with patient data, but to most people, this is like a non-intuitive thing, right? They're like, the system works, why would you change it? Well, he had a very interesting, this is based on a New York Times story from 2018. I put a lot of this text in the show notes so that you can read it. I'm not going to read much of it out. I'm just going to basically quickly go over what happened here. So this is a story in 2018. There is a hospital, I think in Manhattan, it's called the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. It's a specialized clinic for treating cancer. And some people working at this hospital created a company called Page AI, and they got 25 million in venture capital. And this is when journalists got interested, and this whole thing became a bit of a brouhaha. Because basically what they did is they created an AI, this is a great idea. Cancer diagnostics is not trivial. It's not easy, and the people who do pathology for cancer are like, basically you look at tissue samples, right? So you have a tumor, right? So they go in, they cut that piece of that out, and then they do a tissue sample. They do like a very thin slice. They have this what they're called, vibrotomes or something. It's very, very thin knives that vibrate. And they cut a very thin slice and then they make a slide of that. They look under the microscope. These days, of course, it's like all digital. And then a pathologist looks at that and decides if that tumor is like benign, if it's cancer, what kind of cancer. And that's like fuzzy. And lots of mistakes are made there. Which is understandable because it's a really hard job. Anyway, people had the idea we can do this with AI. That AI is another term like blockchain. Basically, machine learning. Basically, machine learning is really good. You can train like an algorithm or a group, a conglomerate, a software. You have a software that you can train with data, right? And you can basically, in the first stages, what you do, you feed it this kind of, these images, and you tell it, well, try to pick cancer cells. And then you can actually have a doctor do the same thing, and then tell the doctor basically has a data set, you put that back in, and the doctor tells the software where the software was wrong, and then the software learns, and it gets better and better and better. Turns out at some point it's better than any doctor. And now about this, I have an acquaintance who is working on software. They are designing software. He's actually working on the actual software. Where they're basically looking at it's the same thing for ECGs, right? They like with an ECG, you have like this wavy line, right? You're used to that, and the cardiologist looks at that and then can see where you like. It's relatively easy to well, it's not as easy as you'd think, but it's relatively easy. I mean, students in medical school learn this all the time. To see when people don't have a sinus rhythm, right? When your heart's beating when the normal rhythm isn't there. But there's another problem. Like if you have atrial fibrillation, there's like all these different kind of patterns, and you have to basically look at the ECG and figure out what's wrong with the heart, and that's like a really hard job. Now it's already at a point where with some AFib things, certain symptoms, the software, or as they say, AI, the people want to sell you something, they always say AI is kind of like blockchain software, where that's better than actual human doctors. Because it turns out, the brain is really good at pattern recognition, but like a wavy line is not really the kind of pattern it's good at. And what your brain and your eyes basically do is they fill in things, right? So what you think you're seeing is often not what you're actually seeing. There's like all these kind of interesting things where like, when they ask people to pick out certain colors in a field of colors, and let's say you're supposed to pick out blue, and they when they start decreasing the appearance of blue, people will actually take other colors for blue, right? It'll start with like purple, and their brain will think that's blue, and it'll go like at some point it's even red. Like if blue gets really, really rare, your brain will like overcompensate, and basically any color you at first think it's blue. It's like really weird. There's like all these kind of things your brain does, and your brain will fill in these lines as well, and you see different things. Whereas software definitely doesn't do that. I'm obviously opposed to the term AI because it has nothing to do with intelligence. But it's definitely it's a completely non-biased. You can introduce bias to machine learning systems as well, but generally, if it works correctly, the computer will analyze what's actually there. It's not like your brain where it fills in things. So they're really good at that. Anyway, so they did a system where basically as a software that picks out what kind of cancer you have, like what kind of growth is on the sample. Now, to do this, to train machine learning systems, anybody who does this kind of stuff will tell you what you need is data. The more data, the better. And they founded this company, and they basically got exclusive use of 25 million patient tissue slides, along with analysis by, as the Times says here, along with decades of work by its world-renowned pathologists. So from that cancer center, which is they're the specialized clinic. They know what they're doing. So they have slides, and they know exactly, like these doctors have said, okay, this is this kind of cancer, this is this kind of benign growth. They have all this data. So they could feed that into an AI system and make an AI that does that. That in itself is not bad, right? They're doing good work here. They're building software that enables hospitals. Even if, that sell this to a hospital in Nicaragua, they don't have access to these specialized doctors maybe. They are very highly paid. But you'd get as good cancer detection rates as you get if you go to this hospital in Manhattan, where like staying there at night probably costs like $1,000 or even more. So that's a good thing, right? That in itself is very much a good thing. The problem is the way they're doing this. It's not a hospital doing this, right? It's a company. It's a company that was founded. And when I'm talking about this, you don't have to misunderstand me. I don't begrudge these people doing this. I know why they do this. Because I know lots of people who work in science, who work in academia. I don't know how it is in the US, but in Germany, they completely annihilated like what we call the Mittelbau. So the people who are neither your doctorate students or postdocs or professors, like anything in between that, they completely got rid of that. You basically don't get a job. There used to be lots of jobs in there who actually did the work. These jobs all don't exist anymore. This is all like postdoc students being exploited now. To say it polemically, but it is bad. And you have lots of people at university that do passionate jobs, but they don't make enough money, and they don't make a lot of money. They don't have really career chances. They don't have a chance. There's only so many people who can actually become professors. So for like, especially these days with startups, for lots of these people, like a way out is to take the science they're doing and, create a company and spin something out of that. And that's what these people were doing. Now, the problem here is they're taking patient data that, these patients, yes, they came to this hospital to, hopefully be cured of cancer. They probably consent to the hospital. Well, they surely consented to the hospital having the data. And they're probably all right. And they probably consented to doctors who are scientists and other scientists who work at this hospital to use for this data to be used in science, right? So if you have a very weird kind of tumor that they've never seen before, they'll publish a paper so that the rest of the world, when they get a tissue slide like that, they can tell, well, that's that kind of tumor. And that patient was probably all right with that because that helps everybody, right? That is probably okay. Now, I don't know if they were all right with this data going to a company who then makes millions and millions of dollars with that. Because now we're leaving the terrain of just, doing something for the public good and doing something for science. Now we get into companies, right? Making profits with that. Another factor that a lot of these doctors that work at this hospital were really pissed off about is that they did the work. This is like 60 years of work by pathologists at this hospital. I mean, they're paid probably well, but they don't get a cut off like this startup thing, right? There's like 5 people, 2 or 3 of them are on the hospital board who are in this company who make all this money now. But none of these doctors who did all the work, like not the patients whose data is being used, nor the doctors who did all of the work. And, that pisses them off, scientists in some cases, who are not paid that well, generally. Generally, the people everybody's applauding, oh, we got the vaccine, right? Hooray for science. We believe in science. The people who do the actual work are not paid well, right? In Germany, they have the shittiest job security. In Germany, we have a law, an ironclad law, that pretty much whatever job you have, I think they can only give you a time base. So they can hire you for, let's say, okay, we'll hire you for half a year, right? And pretty much any job, they can do that twice. And I think it's the third time the third time you hired on a on a limited time contract base at a company for the same job, it becomes a permanent contract, like one that is unlimited. And that goes for any job you can have, pretty much, except if you're a scientist. So I know people who are at university who've been on like 3-month contracts for like, I don't know, 5 years now. Which it's just like, it's one of the great injustices from the Red-Green coalition under Gerhard Schröder, who I actually liked as a politician. But this thing, I think some green guys were involved. This is just a clusterfuck. Just completely like this fucks over scientists. So they, they're not well paid. They have these problems. And now like their work that they did, because they believe in science and they believe in improving humans all around the world, is increasingly used by these kind of companies. And there's also a third issue, which, what is an issue here in the story in the US, but it's probably also a huge issue in Germany, which is that a lot of this is paid by taxpayer money, right? If you're at a university hospital, a lot of the funding comes from taxpayers. In Germany, all of the funding, well, not all, they have, if you do a study, it's usually paid for by like a pharmaceutical company or something, and they pay for a lot of that. But generally, the actual jobs, a lot of that should have been like that. It's changing now, but it used to be. It's a public education system, right? So this is paid by taxpayer money. So we have work that's being done, paid for by taxpayer money, done by people who don't see any of this, and using data from patients who have not consented to this kind of shit, who have no say in what their data is, what's happening with their data. Or as the New York Times story actually says, hospital pathologists have strongly objected to the Page AI deal, saying it is unfair that the founders received equity stakes in a company that relies on the pathologist's expertise and work amassed over 60 years. They also questioned the use of patients' data, even if it is anonymous, without their knowledge, in a profit-driven venture. The decision to license images of patients' tissue slides for a for-profit company also highlights the broader debate of the use of personal medical data, ranging from genetic information to, in this case, images of a person's cells for research and commercial purposes. Universities and teaching hospitals have long sought to turn their scientific discoveries into lucrative business deals. Indeed, 10 cancer drugs approved by the Food and Drug Administration originated at Memorial Sloan Kettering. But the Page AI arrangement is different because what's being commercialized is not an invention per se, but rather access to raw materials, notes, and slides gathered over the decades. I actually think, I personally object to the other part as well. I object to, hospitals, I understand if a for-profit company pays for research and, basically pays millions and millions of euros or dollars or euro dollars for short to have, to do research, to do R&D, then develops a drug, and then they patent it because they want their money back. And I think there need limits. There need to be limits on that, personally, I think there needs to be a time frame for the patent. I think if we're talking a drug that is life-saving to millions of people, let's say they had like a COVID vaccine or a drug or whatever, I would say at some point the state needs to, step in and just, invalidate the patent, make it public domain, pay the company, and, just be done with it. But I think it's even worse if, like in Germany, if this is like so if a guy is like the head of like research at a public teaching hospital, and he develops like this drug and patents it on his own name, right? And then sells like the patent for millions of dollars to a pharmaceutical company. I mean, he is working he's paid by taxpayer money, right? He shouldn't be allowed to do this kind of thing. I think that is bad enough. But now, all your data belong to us. Now they're doing this with data. And data, as people are saying, is the oil of the 21st century. This is what all these AI startups, if you want to call it that, this is what all this is based on. This is what, blockchain, this is what all the hype words of the last 10 years in technology are basically, this is all data driven. So I actually think the guy, what was his name again? Sorry. Sonin, who did this talk at FOSDEM, has a really good point. Also, there's some more details in the show notes about like some of the people involved and how they obviously have ties to, to companies. I mean, in the US, this is especially egregious, you have like all these hedge fund investors and, these hospital people who are also work for like on the side, work for pharmaceutical companies. You're like, I mean, one of your salaries is enough to live on very comfortably. Like, what the hell is going on there? So, yes, I think he has a good point there. And I think the core question, if you're going past this, I personally think this shows us that we need truly non-profit hospitals. I think I've talked about this on this show in the past when I talked a little bit about, the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic and about hospitals and like ICU beds. And I think this doesn't go for the US. This is different depending on what country you're listening to this from. But if you're listening in the UK or if you're listening in Germany, then you will understand me probably when I say, why do hospitals need to make profits? Or why do even non-profit hospitals need to like generate revenue that they just spend on shit? right? Why is that? Why can't they just make a loss? Right, the state is paying for this anyway. In Germany, it's expected. It's the we think when we created a country and when we built the Federal Republic in the 60s and 70s, we developed this system where we said it's the state's job to care about the health of its citizens. That is infrastructure, and that's why there's lots of taxpayer money going into that. Why do they need to why don't we go back to actually have truly non-profit hospitals, right, that operate completely in the public interests? That would be my first step. That doesn't even have to do anything to do with the data. I mean, it impinges on this topic, but that's something I feel very passionate about. I don't understand why hospitals need to make money. That just gives you problems, right? If you start... And I mean, this is how hospitals work in Germany right now. And this is how university hospitals work in Germany. And it's a travesty. Like, I think the problems we're having with the coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2 pandemic, and with ICU beds and all this kind of stuff has nothing to do with the virus. One could say, if I was polemic and I was a progressive, if I was AOC, right, I would say the virus is capitalism, and that has been said. I don't believe that, but I think, yes, this is a problem. This is a capitalism problem. If you think your hospitals are basically companies and you're organizing them under capitalism, capitalist ideas, then of course you will not have a large contingent of empty ICU beds. Because you have people on staff who are not working, right? You need all these care people, doctors, you need the beds, you need the infrastructure, which is infrastructure that, if you have a pandemic or, like the flu every year, right? These beds are probably needed like 10% of the year. And the rest of the time they're empty. And if you're a capitalist, if you're running a company, you have a controlling department, they go like, why is our ICU, percentage of beds, right? Why is it at 30%, 90% of the year? Like, why is it? Oh, in the winter, okay, we use many of these beds. It goes like up to 80%, whatever. But like, why is it like 30% the rest of the year? We have too many people on staff. We have too many of these facilities. We don't really need them, and then you cut them, and then the pandemic happens and people die. That's the problem. But why don't we have public hospitals that we pay for anyway? In Germany, I'm paying for this shit. I'm paying a lot. I'm a freelance. I know exactly what I pay in like healthcare. And it's a lot. Like here, it's not like if you're employed, your employer pays a lot of that. I pay like, okay, there's some help for artists, and I count as a journalist, I count as an artist in Germany, so I can apply for, there's a government, there's like a anyway, it's a complicated system, but they're basically paying my, a lot of what my employer would pay, but I pay a lot. I know that I pay a lot of money. And why do they need to make money? And that fucks up everything. That fucks up research. Like if I was more, if I believed in actual, socialism, what I talked about in that episode when I did the socialism primer, I would say yes, the state should do all that, but I don't think, personally, I don't think the state should run pharma companies, because Soviet Union proved really well how that doesn't work, or East Germany proved how that doesn't work. So there are borders and limits to all of this, but I think hospitals, yes, definitely. I mean, there can be, they can still do research with pharma companies. There can be all this shit. There can be companies involved. But why the hospital? And also, second point, anyway, I'm belaboring that. The data we're talking about, I believe, yes. I believe patient data should belong to the patient. It doesn't have to be obviously stored by the patients. That wouldn't work. But I think the laws should be changed. And this is complicated, but the laws should be changed. I agree with this, with Sonin. With this dude, that would probably be a better way to do it. And And it would be important because it would actually enforce a lot of this. It would prevent a lot of this because suddenly that AI company would have to have a contract with me, right? They would have to license my data and that basically have to report to me, I'm guessing, what they do with my data. And, bets are off if the person is dead. I would do it that, if the person dies, the data doesn't go to the next of kin, right? The data would just go into basically the public domain. I think that's okay. Once you're dead, who cares? I think this is a good point. Of course, I know people who work with patient data, who do scientists especially. This would complicate their work, but actually, interestingly, I talked to some of them, and some of my people I know through other people, acquaintances, actually said, well, currently this is a mess, right? Currently, every hospital, every company, everybody has there are laws, but everybody has different systems to store this data. Some people just carrying them around on USB sticks, which they really shouldn't. That would actually probably be beneficial for laws to be enforced against hospitals and private companies, because they would be forced to care a bit more about this data. And we know there are ways to do this. Companies are forced to. There are all these IBM, SAP, Software AG. They do I did a short foray into this when I was at Heise. It was not a topic I was very keen on, but there's this enterprise, what's it called? Enterprise data relation management bullshit. It's basically software that, for example, modifies your Windows so that you have certain PDFs that you can't, you'd have USB drives that you could plug into your work computer, but this system runs in the background, and if you try to copy one of these files to a USB stick, it says you can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. It puts a access restriction layer on top of the rudimentary way Windows does it. And it allows certain things, right? You can upload certain things to the internet, others you can't, because companies need to do that when they care about trade secrets and all this kind of stuff, maybe confidential information. And why don't hospitals have a system like this for patient data? And this would be a way to do it, right? This would be this. Nobody's going to tackle it. I live in no illusion that this is going to happen. But hey, I think it's a good idea. I think at least something to think about. I wasn't aware, I wasn't actively thinking about the fact that this data doesn't belong to me, and I think it should. But I don't know what you think about this, and this is why it'd be cool if you give me feedback. So go to privatecitizen.press. There's a contact link at the top. Lots of ways to contact me, and I would be very interested in hearing what you think. You think this is all bullshit? Think this is a good idea? To get some ideas how we could handle this, put on the blockchain. Anyway, get in contact. Maybe we can talk about this a bit more in an upcoming episode, or maybe we just have a discussion off the air, which works well for me as well. Right. And speaking of that, let us talk about the feedback. And I'm just going to have a quick break here and just address the chat, because Mode 7 was saying, the last thing I expected from Frap is a mature audiences warning when I start the stream. Dude, you do realize that I stream other stuff than this podcast here, right? And yes, I'm currently playing The Witcher, where we bang. It's the max bonking place where I bonk everybody I can bonk. And there's lots of boobs. Actually, oh god, I'm on the wrong screen for this, but I can on my stream deck, but I can change over. So there's lots of
boobs.
There's lots of boobs. So yes, I need that. Also, I swear a lot. Not so much on this podcast, but on others in the past, I did swear heavily. So think we need to do that. This is definitely a stream for mature audiences. It's not as mature as you probably thought from that warning. For that, I redirect you to my OnlyFans account. That was a joke, in case you didn't get it. Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to continue the show now. I just wanted to quickly address that in between everything else. So I did get some feedback from some people. This is both about episode 56, where I talked about this other FOSDEM talk I found interesting recently, and about the Matrix protocol. And first off, we have Astral C, who comments on this and has 5 points. He says, first, I'm one of the weirdos that doesn't have Facebook. This is why I want to check alternatives, which, I think makes sense. That makes complete sense. I had some comments on the YouTube video as well. People were saying like, "Oh, you said so many people have Facebook, and I know all these people have Facebook, and of course there's all this part of the population." I mean, I was talking about not literally the whole population of the planet. I was talking about the people who have computers, who live, who are live in the West or whatever. Like, yes, the massive amount of these people have Facebook. And if you listen to this, to be honest, you're probably a nerd. So just because 10 people are not on Facebook doesn't mean that is the reality for the majority of the people in your country. I was amazed a while ago. I was on holiday in Fiji, which is an island in the middle of nowhere. Basically, if you go to from Australia towards New Zealand and then keep going for a while, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean there is Fiji, which is an archipelago, and we stayed on a small island there. They didn't have running water. They didn't have toilet facility. Basically, they just had whatever you call that when you just latrines, when it just drops, right? They went to the toilet in the sea most of the time, I think. They had a school there, and they had all like old iMacs, I think, and they didn't have internet. Like, they didn't have wired internet, but they had 3G on every fucking island, and they all had smartphones, and like they had at that time. This was like 3 or 4 years ago. They had a better internet connection than I had in Germany, mobile internet connection, because Germany famously bad at this shit, which was amazing to me. And they all had Facebook. They were like, "Can I take a picture for my Facebook?" And I'm like, what? They all had Facebook. Actually, interestingly, I mean, I'd read about this before because I'm a tech journalist, and Africa and developing nations where they skipped the computer, they skipped the PC, they went straight to the smartphone. And for a lot of these people, and a lot of people on Fiji, the Facebook was the internet. It's like really hard. It's like basically if you grew up in the 90s in the US and it was like AOL was the internet. It's basically like that. So I think many people are, especially nerds, are really underestimating how many people are on Facebook. I think there's whole companies who don't have websites anymore. They just have Facebook sites. I mean, it's changing as well. In Germany, it's also different. But I think Facebook has a lot of influence. This is not to discount your experience. If you're not on Facebook and you look for an alternative, I think that's great. That's great. Like, if I was just a private citizen, I'd be off Facebook. It's just like I need to represent my brand, right? And I need to be known, and that's why I'm still on Facebook. But anyway, second point that Astral C makes: how can we know the encryption won't be disabled without notifying the users? As I tried to address in this episode, you can't, except it's open source, but to be really... So let's say you install an app, a Matrix app on your phone, like let's say Element, which is an open source client. You'd have to do what was that called again? Damn it. A reproducible build of, like, let's say it's installed on Android, of the APT, right? You'd have to build the source code from GitHub, compile it, like the whoever uploads it to the Play Store compiles it with exactly the same settings, and then you can run a checksum on that APT, and if it's the same that on the checksum you have on your phone and everything works, then you can be sure. But basically you can't be sure, but it's an open source project, and people look at the code and people will probably notice. Also, Amitar, I'm recording this as usually. I'm recording stream this live on Twitch. Amitar 1 says, if you're a parent, you also cannot afford being off Facebook. And I've heard this before. I don't have kids. Because of that, I don't have many friends who are parents, many close friends, because usually they get kids and then they drop off the face of the earth. But I talk to people and I talk to parents, and I know that, lots of school communication runs over Facebook, just, keeping in touch with your kids. You have to be on Facebook. So that is also a very valid point. And also, Amitar says, especially during COVID-related homeschool periods, but even before. Yes, so good point there. So we can't completely be sure, but this is a thing in security. You're always confronted with this. If you're an expert in air quotes of security, I'll be on TV and they ask me like, how can we know this is secure? And you're like, you can't. Security is a gray area. You can never be completely secure with a computer system. Computer system's completely secure if it is not working, if it's off, right? And it's the same thing. It's the same in physical security. Like, is your house completely secure? No, right? You might have good locks. You might be home, right? But if like somebody really wants to break in, they can just, outfit a tank with the ram and ram through a wall and shoot everybody inside, right? So it's not like it. You always have to ask yourself, what are you defending yourself against? And in this instance, is what you have secure enough? And the same thing kind of goes with privacy, because at the end of the day, privacy in IT systems is always connected to security, because you can't have privacy without security. And this is kind of the same thing, right? So we can't, to be short, we can't be sure. But people look at these things. They look at code, they look at protocols. They would probably realize if the protocol changed. Right? People are developing APIs for WhatsApp, like also like their stuff that, you're not supposed to develop with, the reverse engineering the protocol. If something changed and something breaks, and they need to figure out what it is. But you can't of course never be sure. Third point. Matrix is also more hassle for contact discoverability compared to WhatsApp and Signal that use the phone number. So those are more recognized as an SMS replacement. Completely true. I don't know why Matrix doesn't do that. I think some of the apps did it in the past. I personally have a problem with especially the way WhatsApp does this, where it's just tied to your phone number. So I have people in my WhatsApp contact list where suddenly like the avatar changed, right? And it's like a different person. And I'm like, hey, Dave, you still there? And it's like Steven now, right? Because they just got the phone number and they got that WhatsApp account or whatever. So yeah, but you're definitely right. And of course, the apps are relatively shit. I think that's the biggest barrier of entry. Like, so I've been trying this Element client on the phone with the server I set up with my wife, and she discovered that apparently on iOS it doesn't have a sharing thing. Like on iOS you have a photo and you want to send that to somebody. You click on sharing and then it says, WhatsApp, and then you click on WhatsApp and it posts it into the chat. Apparently Element doesn't have that yet, or maybe we just couldn't find it. But stuff like that. The UI isn't completely there. Like the keyboard keeps popping up when it shouldn't. That's why I said currently it's for nerds. I wasn't also, to be clear, I wasn't saying everybody should use this, or anybody really. I was just saying maybe you're interested and you want to have a look at it. I certainly am, and I'm looking at it. Point 4, as you said, self-host is not something I expect my family and friends to use. I actually disagree with that, because I think you misunderstood me. So, for example, if you're a nerd and you can self-host this, and if the apps, get a bit better and they're as usable as WhatsApp or Signal is, like, why wouldn't they use it? If you set up the server, they set up their account. You just give them the server address. They put that in, or you can do that with like QR codes that they scan. Like, why wouldn't they use that? Like, they wouldn't know, right? You'd be running the server. Yes, you need a nerd who runs the server. That's always a problem. But, they could just get an account on matrix.org, to be honest. right? The idea of this federation stuff is that not that everybody runs their own server, but that you can if you want to. And as I said, I'm not completely convinced this is working, because I'm not a believer, as I also said, I think in that episode, in federation when it comes to microblogging. So we'll just have to see if this works better. I just think it's theoretically a more usable use case for this kind of thing for messaging. Because we know that works. Because email, it works for email. I mean, email is a different kind of federation, but it works. Basically, it's interoperability. Basically, federation is just a very newfangled term. It's kind of like blockchain for interoperability. Basically, we just need fucking interoperability, right? So what changed is that we have interoperable. Like back in the day, in the 90s, we were like, oh, we need open standards. Then everything's going to be great. But then, Google used the open standard, used Jabber or XMPP or whatever, and built their own messaging solution on it. And then suddenly it's not an open standard anymore. So we figured out just having an open standard doesn't work. What we also need is interoperability. And kind of forced interoperability, right? Email is such an open standard and so interoperable that nobody was able to put that in a silo, because everybody will just go, why doesn't it work with my normal email account? Why do I have to use a Gmail account, right? Google could have never migrated that to their own ecosystem because it was already so federated, to be honest, when Google came along. So the problem is now we're actually on the other, we have other systems and we're trying to implement a federated one. Anyway, this is a discussion for another day, I feel. Point 5 from Astral C just says beer sock. To explain, everybody, if you haven't listened to that part in the episode, which you really should, I spilled beer and it was seeping into the floorboard, and I'm renting this place and I didn't have a tissue handy, so I used my sock and I soaked it in beer, which, is not bad for my feet, and it's better than it seeping into the floorboards. And that is the secret of the beer sock. Maybe we can make that a meme, private. And maybe I can make a shirt. I have a shirt already that people, if they subscribe to a very high Patreon tier, they get a shirt. Maybe I can have a second one, or maybe another piece of merchandising. I can design a logo for it probably that just says beer sock. Should write that down. Actually, let me just get some note paper out here and write down. Beer sock merch opportunities. Right. Gotta further the brand, everybody. Right. That was Astral C's comments. Captain Egghead, also about Matrix, asked if I know of the censorship issue they had with Google Play. And I know about that. And but if you don't, I put a link in the show notes. It's under producer feedback. You can read up on that. So basically, they were pulled out of the Play Store after the riots, like everybody else. What I found interesting is when I set up my Matrix server, I tried to tweet it. I tried to say, hey, if you have a Matrix account, maybe you can come hang out with me here. I have a public room for Fab.Industries. And Twitter, I've never had this happen before. Twitter said I can't tweet that. Because it links to a suspicious website, which was obviously bullshit, because the website was fab.industries, which it otherwise doesn't block links to, and I know it's not a suspicious website. I know it doesn't have any malware on it, because I know every fucking bit that's on that fucking server, because it's in Git and it's Hugo and it's not that complicated. But hey, they discovered, and Matrix actually got back to me, their Twitter account said this is happening, and then they resolved it. Actually, they escalated it to Twitter, but basically they prevented people from tweeting links to Matrix protocol, Matrix servers, which I thought that shows that Twitter is afraid. That kind of blatant censorship, only regimes that are in danger or think they are in danger do this kind of stuff. So take that for what it's worth. Anyway, that's it for now. And now I just have to thank some people. And I actually realized I played the wrong sting. for the feedback thing. So I'll play the credits thing now. So let's go into the very short segment where I thank everybody. Actually, that reminds me, I played the right sting. This is how I always do it. I just confuse myself. It's all this running. It's not good for the brain, I tell you. Anyway, just very quickly, show is produced. I produced this. Obviously, you get it free of charge. It's produced under something called the value for value model, which just says, if you get any value for it, maybe you want to consider giving me some value back, and you decide what that is. Right? It's pay what you want, which could be nothing. If you want to pay, you can join my Patreon, which is like a monthly subscription thing, and you can pick, like, it starts at $1 plus applicable tax, which is actually great about Patreon, that they actually sort that out, so I don't have hassle with the tax people. But if you don't want that, if you just want a one-off contribution, a way to do that, then you can just PayPal to producers@fab.industries. Producers@fab.industries. All the details are on privatecitizen.press. And that's basically it. And with that, I would like to thank everybody. First of all, I have to say thank you to Raul Kabazali, who composed the theme music of the show, which I enjoy. I have to say thanks to Bytemark, who provide me, or have for years now, provided me with two servers that I use to basically as CDN to get you the audio files, which works impeccably. So Bytemark's great. Bytemark.co.uk, the UK cloud hosting company that I, obviously adore for this. And with that, I have to mention everybody who did contribute monetarily. Most of those people on Patreon, and most of them for a very long time, and they're very loyal producers who help out, which I'm very thankful for, because it gives me a little bit of money every month that justifies me spending the time doing this. So thanks to Georges, Niall Donegan, Michael Mullen Jensen, Jonathan M. Hathy, Butterbeans, Dave, Steve Hose, Mark Holland, Shelby Kruver, Vlad, Jackie Plage, 1i11G, Philipp Klostermann, Jaroslav Lichtblau, Kai Sears, IKN, Fadi Mansour, Dirk Didi, Job Hoser, Matt Jallerman, Michael Small, David Potter, Mika, Bennett Piata, Martin, Dave Umrish, Larry Glock, Ricky M, Drive Zero, Mr. Amish, Jonathan Edwards, Barry Williams, Avis, Neil, Tobias, Matt, Captain Eckhead, and D. Now, one thing I want to mention, this is obviously a privacy show. If you want to contribute, but you don't want your name read out, you can either, pick a pseudonym, as some of these people did on Patreon, or you could just message me. Like, just use the contact form. We will figure something out. I'll make sure that I'll never mention your name. I can keep a secret. I'm a journalist. I like to keep my sources anonymous if they want to be, which goes to sources of money. if that is what's wanted. So just a quick mention. If that's an issue for you, just get in contact. And then I also have to thank my Twitch subscribers, because I'm streaming this every week live on Twitch now, because it gives me a bit of interaction. I really like doing that, and I stream a lot there anyway. I stream video games most of the time. But, once in a while, I'll like to show people how a podcast is produced, and it's probably also handy for people who want to know how to do a podcast. You can, I have screen sharing on. You can see my recording software. You can see my show notes. You can see pretty much everything I do. I have a desk cam where you can see my desk, how I use my iPad as a soundboard. You can see my wonderful keyboard in all its glory, and you can see my ugly mug where I do this show. So for some people that's interesting. I do have obviously a Twitch channel, which is just Foxtrot Alpha Bravo. This is Fab in the NATO spelling alphabet, so that's Alpha with an F. But there's also a link in the show notes now at the top, because I also after my streams get archived to YouTube because Twitch only keeps them for 2 weeks. So you can also watch this back if you're ever interested and you want to see me and what kind of faces I pull while I do this. You can do that. Anyway, there are people who subscribe to this Twitch channel, maybe because of the video games I play, but still, they give me money. And if you have a Prime Amazon Prime subscription already, you can subscribe to one Twitch channel for free. It's called Prime Gaming. And so you can just give me money. It's the same as if you would just subscribe otherwise. And it helps me out. So I would like to thank my Twitch subscribers, which currently are Mike the Dane, Galtaran, Redeemer F, IndieGameX, Andy Pants with a 4, and Mode 7 is unavailable. Mode 7 with a 0 and a 7. Well, it's in the show notes if you want to read it. What it actually looks like. PrivateCitizen.press, of course. And some of these people are obviously also Patreon supporters, and I appreciate that doubly. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening. I hope this gave you some ideas. And I hope you, enlighten you a bit. I don't know. Just give me some feedback. Tell me what this show does for you, because that makes me happy. I'm gonna play us out, which I do now. I started this year with some licensed music, which I appreciate. Gives the show a little bit of a more professional vibe, and I like switching it up. So I'm gonna play us out with a song called "I'ma Keep Going." "I'ma Keep Going" by Bo the Drifter. So that's a lovely song you will hear in a minute, and I'll just say goodbye. Thanks for listening. Probably won't see you, or you probably won't hear from me next week for CPU upgrade reasons, but I promise, as always, I will make it up for you. Until then, aim to misbehave, and remember the private citizen, where we defend your right to have something to hide. See you for the next show. Bye-bye.
Oh, I've been long gone, wanna talk to you. I've been hustling for so long. Oh, and I've been thinking about the past, and it keeps me going on. Oh, and I can't stop, no, I don't stop. It's only I can see. Even if I end up all alone, I know my destiny. My mama told me we all bleed the same sun. Oh, prejudice and pride don't make you change. Just always remember where you come from. 'Cause I know you were born to break the chain. So I'm on my way. Yes, I'm leaving today. Are you right with me? See, I'm living the nightlife. But I got a fire that burns so bright, from the back road to the street. I've been long gone for so damn long, so don't tell me that you have to go. Will you still be waiting for me? Tell me, 'cause I gotta know. See, and I can't stop, no, I don't stop. It's only I can see. If I die trying to turn the tide, y'all remember me. See, Mama told me we all bleed the same sun. Oh, prejudice and pride will make you change. Just always remember where you come from. 'Cause I know you were born to make a change. So I'm on my way. Yes, I'm leaving today. Are you right with me? Lord, living in the nightlife, but I got a fire that burns so bright, from the back road to the street. Yes, I'm living in the nightlife, but I got a fire that burns so bright from the back road to the street.
In AD 2101.
Yeah, we've listened to that before. Right, that's it. Thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for watching the stream. I appreciate that a lot. I hope this was fun for you. Or you learned something. Sorry for not interacting that much. As usual, podcast recording. I'll be back to my usual self tomorrow when I will be streaming The Witcher. The Witcher 1. I think at 4 p.m. CET. I think that's the plan. Fab Industries/stream. That's where it actually. What the hell is that? That's actually where it says that. I think the wife just broke something. Well, at least the show's over. Right. I'm just looking if there's anybody doing anything interesting. Oh, actually, this might be interesting. Larian Studios is apparently streaming Baldur's Gate 3. So that should be interesting. So let me see. Let me just look in there so we can rate them. Might be interesting to see what Baldur's Gate 3 looks like. Interesting. So let's do that. I'll see you tomorrow for The Witcher. And maybe in the morning for Valheim. I don't know. I might be I might be streaming Valheim in the morning. But I can't promise that. Anyway, let's go over to Larry. And thanks for watching. I appreciate it very much. And I'll see you again pretty soon. Thank you. And goodbye.